Good afternoon. It's Alan with Paraclete. I hope you'll excuse the sound of the air conditioner running in the background, but we're in southeast Georgia and it is about 1 billion degrees outside today. Um, so air conditioning is necessary. In Romans chapter 11, verse 33, it says, "Oh, the depth of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments, and how inscrutable his ways." When our daughter Hannah was born, we knew right away that she had a will of her own. She held her head up as we were leaving the hospital, and the nurse said, "You better make her lay her head down or she'll grow up to be bossy." Well, we laughed and we didn't listen. And guess what? She grew up to be very bossy. She was notorious for picking up things bigger than she was and trying to carry them. She hasn't changed much into adulthood. She will try when others would quit. She will fight when others would surrender. Sometimes I don't know how she carries the load that she does. Sometimes we all choose to shoulder more than we are able to carry. There are some things that we do not or should not have the strength to carry. There are some things that only God has the strength to carry on his shoulders. When we think about the sovereignty of God, we might tend to think of it in harshness. That God does whatever he wants without regard to how it makes us feel or how it changes our lives. If we think of it this way, we can feel powerless and harbor bitterness toward God when things happen, such as losing a loved one unexpectedly. When we counsel those on the journey of grief, one of the most common statements we hear is, "If I would have done this or that, things would have been so different." Resting in God's sovereignty does not mean that we simply give up and allow nature to take its course, or to not fight for life-saving interventions. But it does mean that God's sovereignty is too heavy for us to carry. When we lose a loved one, especially a child, we tend to take on the responsibility and the guilt of doing more or not doing enough. Maybe if I would have been more attentive, I would have noticed that something was wrong or something just wasn't right. Losing a child is especially hard because it goes outside the natural progression of life and death. We expect to lose our grandparents, and most of us live long enough to lose our parents. Those are not easy losses, but it is in the natural order of things. But when a child is lost, it is a shock to the system because it's not the way it's supposed to be. The providence of God is far too heavy for us to carry. It is an attribute that only God himself has the power to carry on his shoulders. He alone knows the number of our days. And no matter how hard we exercise or eat right or fight for interventions, the number of our days are ordered by God alone. Should we exercise and take care of ourselves? Absolutely. Should we fight for life-saving surgeries and interventions for our babies? Most assuredly so. But when we allow the guilt that comes with grief over the things that were not in our control, we wrap our fingers tightly around something too big for us. Our lives as believers should be lives of surrender and trust. Corrie ten Boom once said, "I have learned to hold all things loosely, for when I hold them too tightly, God has to pry my fingers away." There is a verse of scripture that I quote often. It says, "Casting all your care upon him because he cares for you." That's from 1 Peter 5:7. Because he cares for you. Can you let that sink in a moment? That word, care, could be translated anxiety or stress or guilt. Whatever the cares of your life look like, he says to give them to him because he cares for you. We do not only grieve when we lose a loved one, we also grieve over unexpected circumstances. We may have had dreams for our child that now we are starting to realize that those dreams may not be what we envisioned, and we grieve. And we'll ask ourselves, what if I had done this or that? Maybe my baby wouldn't have been born with a life-limiting diagnosis or a life-limiting condition. As believers, we believe that God is in control. We also believe he is good and he is faithful. God does not nod off from time to time while things go wrong. He doesn't forget to look after you. In the weaving of the tapestry of your life, God knows which threads will make the most beautiful picture. There are times when life is hard and it's hard to see the goodness of God. There are times when circumstances cause our hearts to break. God is still good, and he takes all of those things and weaves them into a picture that glorifies him. You will still feel grief. You will still feel guilt. You will still feel anger. You will still feel sadness. But did you know that the same area of the brain that processes anxiety and stress is the same area of the brain that processes gratitude? The two cannot coexist. If you are focusing on gratitude, you can't focus on the things that make you anxious. In our work with the folks of Verity's Village, we often watch helplessly as moms and dads fight for their children only to hold them for seconds or minutes or maybe months. We are struck with so much sadness when we see a post from a mom who we've walked through the uncertainty of a diagnosis, the long months of waiting, and then we see our angel was born sleeping, or our angel was born, so we held her in our arms only to place her in the arms of Jesus after a few moments. We feel the grief with you, and we are here to walk with you in this journey. But I will ask you to do this. Please don't allow yourself to shoulder the guilt. God has not nodded off. He has not forgotten you. And even though his goodness is hard to see, he is still good. He alone is strong enough to shoulder his providence. Don't view God's providence as him being harsh and uncaring. View it as he never sleeps or slumbers. He numbers all of our days. He counts the hairs on our head, or the lack of the hairs on our head. He compassionately and inexplicably loves us. Cast all your care, your worry, your grief, your guilt, your anger, your sadness on him, because he cares for you. Have a blessed day.